You know how every village has that one person who's been abroad, studied in some distant foreign land, and returns home with an accent so polished you'd think they've forgotten how to say hello properly? Well, this story begins exactly there. A young man returns to Wad Hamid, a sleepy little village near the Nile in northern Sudan, after years of studying in England. He's not just a scholar, oh no, he's trained as a poet. That's right, the kind of person who can turn your everyday misery into a sonnet about existential dread. As he arrives, the village erupts with the usual ululation and excitement. This is not just any homecoming. At this time in Sudan, finding someone who had been abroad and studied in England was as rare as stumbling upon a functioning umbrella in a desert storm.
I even brought an umbrella.
Everyone's buzzing with pride, like our boy made it. Everyone's impressed, except for one man. And that's where things get interesting.
Who said that?
There's this one villager, Mustafa Sa'eed, who looks at my homecoming with about the same enthusiasm you'd reserve for lukewarm tea. He's not clapping, not smiling, not even pretending to be impressed. Naturally, our poet narrator becomes obsessed with this mysterious man. Who is this Mustafa Sa'eed? And, why does he behave like someone who's seen the entire world and found it all meh?
Who does that?
Our narrator starts sniffing around for answers. He asks his father, who tells him the basics. Mustafa is from Khartoum, he's a good farmer, and while he's not exactly a recluse, he's not the kind of guy you'll find gossiping by the village well either. He just sort of keeps to himself.
Just curious.
But the narrator wants more. The first real clue comes one night when Mustafa, in this drunken haze, just starts reciting perfect, flawless English poetry. Not the roses are red type, but real poetry that would make, honestly, an Oxford professor weep.
What is happening?
And just like that, the narrator realizes there's more to this man than a quiet farmer's life. So he confronts Mustafa, and Mustafa finally opens up. And boy, does this man have a story.
Woo, look at that.
Mustafa Sa'eed was no ordinary child. He was a precocious, almost frighteningly intelligent boy with this insatiable hunger for learning. He breezed through schooling in Sudan, and before long, found himself in Cairo for his secondary education. There, he caught the attention of an Englishman who thought, this boy is something special. Before long, Mustafa's brilliance took him to England, to the hallowed halls of Oxford, and that's where his life took a sharp turn into dangerous territory. In England, Mustafa didn't just study. He became the embodiment of every exotic fantasy the West has ever had about the mysterious East. He exaggerated his Oriental roots, wrapped himself in the aura of the dark, dangerous prince, and seduced English women with a combination of charm, lies, and Shakespearean-level tragedy. And the women? They ate it up. They adored him with the kind of wild, desperate love you only read about in bad romance novels. But Mustafa's relationships were far from romantic. They were destructive. So destructive that 3 of his lovers ended up committing suicide. But the real scandal came with his marriage. Mustafa married a manipulative and, let's say, creatively kinky woman. Their relationship was less happily ever after, and more we need a therapist. One day, in a fit of rage, or maybe despair, Mustafa killed her. In court, he failed to defend himself, and the professor-turned-lover boy was sentenced to 7 years in prison. After his release, Mustafa returned to Sudan, but he wasn't the same man anymore. The brilliance, the charm, the destructive passion, it had all burned out. He came back home like a man trying to wash away the ghosts of his past, a man seeking redemption, or maybe just, silence. But silence doesn't come easy when you've lived a life like his. The narrator pieces much of this story together from his conversations with Mustafa, but also, tragically, after Mustafa's death.
Wait, what?
One day, Mustafa drowns in the flooded Nile. The villagers, practical as they are, write it off as an accident. But the narrator, he's not buying it. He believes it was suicide. And he just can't shake off Mustafa's ghost. His story, his failures, his choices. Things get even more complicated when the narrator discovers that Mustafa left him with a massive responsibility to look after his wife and 2 sons, as well as his entire estate. And here enters Hosna bint Mahmud. Hosna is no ordinary woman. Having lived with Mustafa, she's seen enough of the world to know what she doesn't want. And what she doesn't want is to be forced into marriage with one of the village's octogenarian patriarchs. You can't blame her. Imagine being young and vibrant only to be handed off to a man who creaks when he walks. But one man, Wad Reyes, doesn't care. He's determined to marry her no matter how much she resists. The result? A horrifying tragedy. Hosna is forced into this marriage, and in an act of desperate resistance, she kills Wad Reyes and then takes her own life.
What the hell was that?
This double tragedy shakes the village and the narrator to the core. By this point, the narrator realizes how deeply entangled he has become in Mustafa's shadow. Mustafa's life, his mistakes, and his death have left an indelible mark. The climax of the narrator's journey comes when he himself is caught in a life-and-death situation, almost drowning in the Nile, just like Mustafa did. But unlike Mustafa, he fights back. He chooses to live, to separate his own identity from Mustafa's ghost, and to finally assert that he is his own man. And that, my friends, is the wild, tragic, and honestly unforgettable story of Season of Migration to the North by Tayeb Salih. At just over 150 pages, this novel packs the emotional weight of a 500-page epic. It's a book about freedom and its limits, about the choices we make and the heavy consequences they carry. One of the key themes that struck me is the idea of identity. Mustafa's tragedy comes from his inability to reconcile his Sudanese roots with the Western world he tried so hard to conquer. He became a caricature of himself, consumed by the very stereotypes he used to seduce others. Another powerful theme is the subtle critique of tradition versus modernity. The story of Hosna's forced marriage and tragic end exposes the cruel, outdated practices that continue to harm women. Salih doesn't preach, but he shows us the devastating consequences of a society unwilling to change. There's also a sharp, almost uncomfortable discussion of colonialism and cultural clash. Mustafa's life in England is both a seduction and a revenge of sorts. He plays into the fantasies of the English, but in doing so, he destroys himself. And finally, there's this lingering question: what does it mean to bring knowledge home? The narrator, and by extension Tayeb Salih, suggests that Western education means little if it doesn't serve your own people, if it doesn't bridge the gap between where you come from and where you've been. I'll be honest, I found this book deeply moving. It's tragic, but in the kind of way that leaves you thinking for days. Mustafa Sa'eed is not a hero. He's not even really a villain. He's a cautionary tale. And Hosna's story? It hit me the hardest. Her resistance, her desperation, and her final act of defiance, those moments linger long after you close the book. Tayeb Salih himself had an extraordinary life. Born in Karmakol, near Al-Daba in Sudan's northern province, he came from a family of small farmers and religious teachers. His early plan was to work in agriculture, but life had other plans. He studied at the University of Khartoum and later the University of London, eventually working for the BBC's Arabic service and becoming Director General of the Ministry of Information in Doha, Qatar. Later, he worked with UNESCO in Paris, representing them in the Gulf states. Salih wrote only a handful of novels, but Season of Migration to the North catapulted him to international acclaim. In 2001, the Arab Literary Academy even declared it the most important Arabic novel of the 20th century. And honestly, I see why. His writing is layered, poetic, and sharp all at once. If you want a book that's short but deeply thought-provoking, a book that mixes personal tragedy with big-picture ideas like colonialism, identity, and freedom, this is the one. It's not a light read, there's pain and darkness here, but it's worth every page. So go find yourself a copy of Season of Migration to the North and let Tayeb Salih pull you into the haunted world of Mustafa Sa'eed and the narrator who tries to escape his shadow. Hey, thanks so much for hanging out with me today. If you're interested in diving deeper into this book, I've left some links down in the description. You can use it to grab yourself a copy and keep the adventure going. And if you're in the mood for more great reads, don't go just yet. Click on one of the videos popping up right now that I think you'll love. And don't forget to give this review a like, leave a comment, or even subscribe if you'd like to see more. Every bit of support helps us grow this little community of book lovers. See you in the next one.